Okay, so we're going to continue chapter 37, Perek Lamed Zayin in the Tanya, second half. Very important chapter, especially the second half. Various ideas are explained. Some of them are difficult to understand because we're dealing with Kabbalah, Chasidut. So perhaps I'll just clarify one concept for those who maybe have been following but are still not clear about what the Or Ein Sof is all about, the divine light. Because this concept, this term, is mentioned quite a few times in the book. And it's significant because if we don't understand what it does, then we don't really understand a great part of this book, the Tanya. When we talk about the divine light, we're not talking about a physical light, we're talking about something spiritual. And when one learns Kabbalah, we are warned not to compare physical terminology with spiritual terminology. We cannot take that which is spiritual and dress it up with a physical description because it's not physical. It cannot be described really in physical terms. The reason nonetheless why it is done is only for us to have a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about. We're talking about a light, but what is a light? Is it an energy? What is it exactly? What does it do for us? Apparently it is something very significant because it permeates all of the existence. The entire world is filled with the light, with the divine light. In this physical world, however, this divine light cannot be perceived so well because of the vast amount of darkness. And when we talk about darkness, we're also talking about something more spiritual. This is a very physical world, therefore it's dark. Dark meaning that the light of Hashem, even though it permeates the entire existence, is dimmer. It can still be seen, and it's important for us to reveal it. That is the job of the Jewish people, to reveal this light, as I will further explain. But as this light is revealed, whether it is on the human being or on the physical world, it does something. It transforms the individual, transforms the world, it elevates it. It takes it from an impure state, from a physical state, and elevates it to a more spiritual state, a loftier, a holier state. And the only way we can know anything about this besides learning about it is to feel it, because it really transforms the human being. And that is a little bit of what we spoke about last week, what it does to the individual, and now we will see how this affects the entire world, because it's important to keep in mind that light illuminates, and when you're dealing with darkness, and you have a dark room, for example, and you turn on the light, it will illuminate, it will definitely do something, and you will only see the difference after the light is turned on, if you've seen it before it was turned on. So when an individual learns Torah, he knows how he was and what he felt before, and now he learns Torah, now he experiences Torah and the observance of mitzvot. He will definitely notice a difference in himself, in his life. So it's hard to tell someone what this does unless he actually goes through it and feels it for himself. And in the world, we will really not be able to see the tremendous transformation that will occur until Mashiach comes. We will be able to see then what the world looks like and what the world looks like now. But if you want to have an idea, just think back to what the world looked like when you were children and what the world looks like now. It's a very, very different world, technologically speaking. And this is minuscule. Technology is minuscule. We're talking about physical world. And here I'm talking about a spiritual transformation where people will realize the truth. People will not be confused. People will only want to do the right thing, the will of Hashem. And in order to have a glimpse of that, we learn the Torah, because the Torah does tremendous help. It helps one tremendously in a spiritual way to be able to elevate him to a level where he can gain tremendous insights about himself, about the world, tremendous clarity. So this is something that cannot be known or felt unless you actually go through it. And those who learn the deeper Torah, the mysteries of the Torah, the Kabbalah, of course gain tremendous insight into another dimension altogether, which is called the Sodot HaTorah, the secrets of the Torah. So this is a very important book, the Sefer Tanya. There are other important books as well, only because they serve as a key. These chokhmot, these sources of knowledge, serve as a key to unlocking the tremendous mysteries of the world. Without this key, how will one ever be able to figure out in the 70, 80 years that he's alive? No way in the world. So in the end of last shiur, what he mentioned was how the purpose of this entire creation of the world really is in Yemot HaMashiach and Tchiyat HaMetim, the end of days, time of the resurrection, when Hashem's kavod, Hashem's glory will be revealed to all for all to see. And when that happens, of course, the Ruach HaTum'ah, the impure spirit, will be removed, will be completely gone. But he emphasized how all of that can only come about through our ma'asim. Hashem doesn't do the work himself. It needs to come through our deeds. Deeds are very important. The observance of the mitzvot. That is partially the mission of the Jewish people. I mean, every human being has a mission, an important mission. Everyone is special to Hashem. Just that everyone has a different job. And these spiritual deeds are, for the most part, supposed to be observed by the Jewish people. By observing them, we explain how we draw that light, that divine light, into the individual observing the mitzvot. And now we need to understand how that will be reflected, or how that is also significant when it comes to the world. We know by now that this transforms the individual, but how does it happen on a global scale, on a global level? How does the observance of the mitzvot do something so important for the benefit of the entire world? For the individual, what's important are the 248 positive commandments and the 365 negative commandments. By holding ourselves back, by restraining ourselves from doing certain negative things, then we prevent that which is negative, the negative powers, the impure powers, from taking hold of us, from taking control over us. We want to weaken their control, weaken their grasp. And one way of doing that, an important way of doing that, a powerful way of doing that, is the observance of the mitzvot. Somehow, through the observance of the positive commandments and refraining from the negative commandments, we're able to diminish the power of the sitra achara, of the impure forces in the entire world. So how does it happen? How does it happen that by removing the klipot, the impurities, from the nefesh, we're able to create a similar situation in the world, where we are able to remove or to diminish the influence of the impure forces in the entire world? So he explains like this. Klalut Israel. The essence of the Jewish nation comprises of 600,000 souls. And these 600,000 souls comprise the essence of the vitality of the entire world. Why? What does one thing have to do with another? Because these 600,000 souls really have that mission. It is for them that the world was created. They are here for that purpose, to elevate this world. And as was explained in the very beginning, of the Tanya, all the neshamot, all the souls have a mission. Here we're talking about the mission of 600,000 souls that are intended to elevate this world. We have carpenters, we have plumbers, we have repairmen. We have all kinds of people with all kinds of important jobs, and they all contribute. They contribute to the welfare of society, hopefully, as long as one is not a criminal, right? Thinking only of himself. People can contribute to beautifying, to perfecting this world, to stabilizing this world in a very important way. That is why everybody's important, especially if he contributes. What we're talking about here is 600,000 souls that were designated as souls that will be occupied with spirituality. Just like within the Jewish people, you have Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, of all the 12 tribes, designated for a more spiritual task. All the Jewish people need to observe the commandments, but Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, focuses on the Avodat Hashem, the service of Hashem, especially in the temple. So just for you to have an idea of what I mean by designating someone. Yeah, everyone is designated for someone else. But here, it's important to keep in mind that we have a tremendous mission and responsibility. It's a responsibility. We better do a good job. So much is dependent on these souls that need to carry out this mission to elevate the world, to perfect the world. So the world, in a sense, is created for them. So they, in essence, comprise the vitality of this entire world. Their makeup is therefore essential to the success of this particular mission. The makeup of their soul, the spiritual makeup of their soul, because it has what it needs to do the job. And every part of these 600,000 souls, every individual, has one part of the 600,000 parts of this world. In other words, when we talk about comprising the vitality, we were saying that each one of the 600,000 also has something in it that is representative of a part of this world that it needs to elevate, that it needs to rectify. And that rectification, that individual rectification, will depend on that particular nefesh, that particular soul, that it do whatever it needs to do to elevate its part in the world, to unite with Hashem. And that is, of course, when it does the will of Hashem, when it observes the mitzvot, it does everything that is expected of it to do. So, in a sense, when a nefesh lives a physical life, because we're talking about the physical world right now, and observes the mitzvot in this physical world, for example, it eats, it works, whatever it does, and by doing so, in other words, by doing that which is physical, but doing it for the sake of Hashem, observing a mitzvah with that maaseh, with that deed, it in fact is elevating it. So it makes a difference why somebody eats, for example. Do you live to eat, or do you eat to live? In other words, are you eating for what purpose? Just to fill your belly? That is physical. All that does is fill up the belly. It doesn't really do anything on the spiritual realm. But one can take a physical act and elevate it, the same physical act, if he focuses differently, if he makes a blessing before he ate, if he makes a blessing after he ate. All of that somehow sanctifies, elevates that physical deed, and does something positive to this physical world. So his first question about this idea of 600,000 souls being representative of this mission is, but wait a minute, don't we have more than 600,000 souls? We have millions of Jews, we have millions of people. So how could it be that one of these 600,000 can really do a one part of the 600,000 parts that need to be done in this world? Is it possible for one individual to accomplish so much? So he says, first of all, when we talk about 600,000 souls, we're talking about 600,000 parent souls. All these souls, all these parent souls are further subdivided into 600,000 nitzotzot, 600,000 sparks. Each one of those sparks being a soul. And you have the same idea repeat itself with the nefesh, ruach, and neshama, as well as in all four worlds, in Atzilut, in Beriah, in Tzirah, in Asiyah. And each nitzotz, in each one of those sparks or souls, did not really come down into this world for itself. And neshama, a soul, a divine soul, is pure, does not really have a need to come down to rectify something. It's divine. The main idea of a soul coming down into this world and dressing up in a physical body, that was being born, is for the tikkun of the nefesh and the guf, just to rectify the nefesh habemi, the animal soul, and the physical body. Because he says, think about it. For the neshama itself, for the soul, coming into this world is a yerida gedola, is a tremendous descent from the spiritual to the physical. The neshama would rather not have to come down. But that is part of Hashem's design of this world, how the neshama earns its reward by going through the physical world, by doing what it needs to do here to rectify it. Remember, not that it's rectifying itself, it doesn't really need to. But it accomplishes something in this world, and in this way it earns its share to the world to come. The neshama, coming down to this world, therefore, does not really do anything for itself. Because he says, even a tzaddik gamur, even somebody who becomes a completely righteous man and serves Hashem with love and fear, he will never be able to reach the same level of love and fear in the upper walls that he has in the upper walls down here below. His dvekut, or even of a tzaddik gamur, a completely righteous man, his connection to Hashem is much more powerful upstairs in the spiritual world than it is down here. So for this tzaddik gamur, in other words, an individual that became completely righteous, it's in some ways detrimental, I would say, according to the rabbis, that the odds are against one to come down to this world and succeed 100%. But let's say he does succeed. He's losing out. In some ways, he has less of a connection here than he has above. So why would he come down? So even if he becomes a tzaddik gamur, it's not for the benefit of the neshama per se, because it is already very, very much connected to Hashem before it comes down. So what does it do when it comes down? It's supposed to le'afrid. It's supposed to remove or disconnect the nefesh, the animal spirit, from the gimel klipot atmeot, from the three completely impure shells. How? Through the observance of the 248 positive commandments and through refraining of the 365 negative commandments. In other words, by elevating its part, each nefesh has its part, its mission, by elevating its part that shayachla, that corresponds to her in this olam hazeh, through the observance of the mitzvot, it could achieve that. It could remove those klipot. Again, it's a very abstract concept, and a lot of it, I should say most of it, we will never be able to fully comprehend while we are in this physical world. That's why it's important just to understand that this is the reality. The reality is that the human being consists of a neshama and a guf, even though we don't see the neshama. Sometimes you can detect it. So we need to relate to this with a certain level of emunah, of course, of faith, that this is the way it works. And after a person has, of course, immersed himself in the study of the Kabbalah, of the Torah, observes the mitzvot, only then he can reflect and see and compare with others who have not. The vast amount of difference of what it is to refine. I guess you could take a small example from a refinement of character. One who was with a tendency of anger from the very beginning of his life. He had this tendency of anger, and he worked himself up. He refined that character. He's in complete control of himself. The rabbis praise him. He's koveshet yitzro. He's the strongest of all because he conquers his evil inclination. He controls himself. So you can see examples of refinement of character. People who've saved their marriage. People who have become closer to Hashem, who were so distant. People who were on the verge of suicide, very, very depressed. Was a result of spirituality. They somehow were able to get out of that predicament. So it's not easy for us to understand how spirituality works completely because we don't see it, but we can identify with it because we can see the good and the bad. That which is good is altruistic. It does for others. It is productive. It builds the world. Like charity, which we'll talk about, kindness. But we can see the opposite of it, evil, that does only for itself, doesn't want to do for others, that is destructive. So we have examples in real life. We just give it names of good and evil, but we don't understand what they are, where it all comes from. So B'ezrat Hashem, maybe I'll give a separate lecture about that, on how to identifying good from evil, being able to see the divine light in ways that we would never thought of, we would never think of that it's a divine light. But that's what it is, that this divine light is really concealed and dresses up in all the mitzvot, which are directives, instructions of Hashem. So when something good is being done, it's the light of Hashem being dressed up in that instruction. When one learns Torah, he's uniting himself with the will of Hashem, with the chokhmah of Hashem. And that is why he gains tremendous levels of spirituality, tremendous insights. So only after he's into it can he detect it and understand it. So when one comes down into this world, that is his job, to elevate the nefesh habehemit through the observance of the mitzvot by tying them, connecting them with that Or Ein Sof, with that divine light.
Hashem is the one that chooses your soul? It's your
Yeah, sure. There are many souls, and Hashem chooses in which body it will go into, in which family it will be born. And depending on the level of that soul, where it comes from, what the root of that soul is, because there's different roots in the various worlds that I mentioned earlier. That is where the neshama will be directed to go and do, in a way like a GPS. The problem is that even though it has instructions, it gets distracted. That's part of the plan, that the evil inclination attempts to interfere with that mission. The exact same way that you find in the story of Chet Adam Rishon, which is really, in some ways, a blueprint of what this world will look like. Chet Adam Rishon meaning the first sin, the primordial sin, where we read about a story with a serpent and Adam v'Chava. Doesn't make too much sense. A serpent talking, tempting, and seducing, or inciting. Yeah, that's the story of humanity. The serpent meaning the evil inclination, giving man a hard time to rebel against this God. That story is the essence of this battle. So he goes on to explain, as it is explained in the Sefer Etz Chaim, where he talks about this mission of the soul, that it's not for itself. It does not need any rectification. But it comes down dressed into this world in order to draw the light, the divine light, into this world, to rectify, to elevate this world. And this coming down, he explains, is Sod Galut, HaShekhinah, Levarer Nitzotzin Shel Tusha. There is a mystery behind the Galut, the exile of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, coming down to this world to do what? To be mevarer, to refine or to remove the sparks of holiness that are present here. And this is a little bit difficult to comprehend. We definitely don't have an idea at all whatsoever why Hashem needed, I mean, he doesn't have any needs, why he wanted it to be done in such a way that he has to come down, and he wants us, of course, to be involved as well, to elevate that which is holy back to its source. We talked about holy sparks in the very beginning of creation, as the Kabbalah explains, holy sparks, which fell into the klipot, fell into the impure shells. And Galut HaShekhinah means that the Shekhinah comes down here in the form of exile, because it's not in its preferred state, preferred place. But it wants to elevate that which is holy back to its source. It wants to remove that which is holy. And in the same way that this is a galut for the Shekhinah, it's also a galut for the Neshama, to come down into this world and to dress itself up in a physical body, to elevate or to rectify that which needs to be rectified, which involves removing the holy sparks from the klipot. So in the same way that we don't understand Galut HaShekhinah, we don't understand why it needed to be this way. It's a sod, in other words, it's a mystery. But it needs to happen in this way, that man who is entrusted, and especially the Jew, who has more of a responsibility with completing this job, he can only do so by following the instructions of Hashem. Otherwise, he could ruin it. Not only is there a chance he won't do anything, he can actually ruin it, make things worse. Man, remember, is the only one that has free will. Animals don't have free will. So man is the one that can make things worse. But obviously the goal is for man to perfect, to make things better, and that perfection can be seen slightly from how he deals with bread. How do you make bread? You have to work hard to make a loaf of bread. But you are perfecting the seed that was planted in the ground. And after all that work, all that hard work in producing the seeds, you're not ready to eat the seeds raw. You're going to remove all the impurities from it. You're going to grind it. You're going to make it into flour. You're going to bake it until you produce a perfected product, a loaf of bread. So there are various signs in creation of how man is designed to perfect, to elevate this world, to make this world a better place. Not that it's not a good place, Hashem made it a good place, but He wants us to elevate it in a spiritual way. So in order to do so, we're given instructions. So coming down into this world and dressing itself up in a physical body is the only way for the neshama to be able to observe the mitzvot in the physical world. As we've explained various times, the neshama cannot do anything in the physical world without the intermediary of the physical body. But here it's not just an intermediary. What we're saying is that it is actually in this nefesh habehemi, in this guf, in this physical body, that the tikkun is happening. And once the tikkun happens in the physical body, it happens in the world too. The human being is a microcosm, a small world. And what he does to himself, he's doing to the world. He elevates himself, as we've said, he's elevating the world too. However, it's important to remember this can only be done through kiyum mitzvot aseh, dafka, only through the observance of the positive commandments. Because it is only through observing commandments of taking certain actions that we're able to acquire this tikkun for the neshama and for the world. He goes on to say, now we can understand how come the rabbis spoke so greatly about the importance of mitzvat tzedakah, of the mitzvah of charity. And they said, charity, shkula keneged kol mitzvot, it outweighs all the mitzvot. Why? Why charity more than all the other mitzvot? And he brings down how the Yerushalmi even describes charity as the mitzvah. Doesn't even say charity, it's the mitzvah. No, it's the big commandment that outweighs all the other commandments. Why is it so? Why is it that this mitzvah of charity outweighs other commandments? So he explains that all the commandments elevate the soul and bring the soul closer to Hashem. Every mitzvah is able to elevate the soul. The soul that is dressed up in the physical body is elevated by the observance of every mitzvah. But somehow with zakah, the entire nefesh achiyonit is elevated in a way that is higher than any other mitzvot. Why is that so? And he explains as follows. With zakah, the nefesh achiyoni, the nefesh of vitality, is dressed up the most in the mitzvah of tzedakah, because with the mitzvah of tzedakah, much more of that nefesh is involved. The reason for that is like this. With every mitzvah, one particular act is done. You did one particular mitzvah, one particular act, and that one part of the nefesh is elevated. As we've been saying all along, that the 248 limbs correspond to a particular mitzvah. So when one observes a mitzvah, puts on tefillin, for example, so a part of his nefesh is being rectified. One part is being elevated. Takes an etrog. right? You're doing it with your hand. The hand is involved in that particular mitzvah. With tzedakah, your entire vitality, the entire nefesh is involved because you work for your money. So the entire physical body is involved in producing that money, and that money right now is going for tzedakah. So you see, that's what he means. That with the mitzvot, a part of him is being elevated. With tzedakah, with charity, his entire essence is involved because he's working for that money. And it's that money that is producing, it is that money that is contributing towards this mitzvah of tzedakah. So that his entire nefesh is elevated to Hashem. What about somebody that doesn't work hard for his money? Just his personal situation is such that he's not working hard. Still, he could have used whatever money he has for his own personal interests, and instead gives it for tzedakah. So same idea. Still, his entire essence, his entire nefesh is elevated through this mitzvah of tzedakah. That is why he says, rabbis remind us that Dolat tzedakah, charity, is so great, shemekarevet et hageulah. It is charity that brings close the redemption, the final redemption, more so than any other mitzvot, because it elevates the nefesh more than all the other mitzvot. So it accomplishes more than what any other mitzvah can accomplish on its own, for this reason. Okay, so up until now we've seen the importance, the necessity of the mitzvot, the positive and the negative, and what they accomplish in elevating the soul, in elevating the world. Now he asks a very, very important question that if he wouldn't have asked, I would have asked. It's a question that is actually spoken about a lot. As much as we know that the mitzvot are important, the rabbis are very clear that Talmud Torah keneged kulan. They tell us that learning of Torah outweighs everything, all the mitzvot. Very famous statement. Wait a minute, we just finished saying that tzedakah is the greatest of all mitzvot, right? So what about this very important statement? It's true. Talmud Torah is the highest. How do we explain this? So it says, remember, Talmud Torah, when one learns Torah, where does it really take effect? What's the influence of the learning of Torah? On the dibur and machshava. In other words, the learning of Torah comes about, and where we see its effect is in the speech and in the thought. The speech and the thought, which are being affected and which are actually generating the learning of Torah, they are the ones that are involved in the Torah. This dibur and machshava, they are the levushim apnimiyim of the nefesh. Remember, these are the internal garments of the animal spirit. Internal garments. They're more elevated. And the Torah has hashpa'ah. The Torah is able to affect these garments. And they are also the essence of the faculties of chokhmah, binah, v'da'at, from klipat noga in the nefesh. So we're dealing with a very important area, the thoughts, the wisdom, the understanding, chokhmah, binah, v'da'at of the nefesh. That is being directly affected through the learning of the Torah. And they are, as a result, included in the holiness when one really is immersed in Torah. He elevates them, he connects them to the Kedusha. So, this is not to be taken lightly. We're talking about the Chokhmah Binah V'Da'at. We're talking about the internal garments of the Nefesh being positively affected. So even though he points out that the Midot of Chagat, Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet, for Benonim, for average people, can never be completely transformed to Kedusha, as was explained earlier. only the levushin, only these garments can be transformed, but not the midot of the nefesh. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet already relate to the actual emotive aspects of the nefesh, from where we draw the fear and love of Hashem. And the reason why they cannot be transformed completely in the Benoni is because the Ra, that which is impure, is stronger in them much more than in the midot of Chokhmah bin Avadat, Chabad. The reason is because these midot, emotive midot, nourish from the Kedusha a lot more. This is related to a concept in Kabbalah called Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, which is what produced the klipot. And the klipot, the impure shells at that time of the breaking of the vessels, the beginning of creation, was more emphasized in the midot, which therefore makes it a lot more difficult to elevate the Ra in them. Whereas the Ra in the Chokhmah bin Avadat is a little bit easier to elevate through the learning of Torah. So anyway, even though it's true that a certain aspect of the Benoni cannot be completely transformed to Kedusha as easily, but at least the Chokhmah bin Avadat can be, and that's very important. If he elevates that, his understanding, his connection to Hashem, even though he on the emotive level, he's not as pure and as strong as a tzaddik gamur, still he's able to influence the Chokhmah bin Avadat, and that can only happen through the Torah. So the Torah is able to accomplish something in the Benoni, a very important accomplishment, that he can connect in a very powerful way in the area of the intellect, of the mind. Even though the heart can also be connected, but not as much, not as strong. Remember, Benoni is an individual who's always going to be struggling. He will resist and he will succeed, but he will not transform all the midot into the Kedusha, where he will never even have any thought of doing that which is wrong. But at least the Chokhmah bin Avadat, he can have emunah, he can have complete pure faith, he can connect to Hashem through those faculties. The internal garments can be affected through the learning of the Torah. So what do we see from all of this? That the limud of Torah, the learning of the Torah, is what really is able to influence the levushim, the garments, which is basically the machshava, one's thoughts. And it is able to elevate the faculties of Chokhmah bin Avadat in the nefesh to the Kedusha. He points out that also it's very important to remember what the Tikkunim of the Zohar says, that the esekat of Talmud Torah, in other words, when one is involved in the learning of Torah, has a certain advantage over mitzvot for the following reason. If you recall, we explained it in the past that the 248 positive commandments are like organs of the king. That's what they're called. Evarim Malkah. And each organ corresponds to another vessel that is parallel to the neshama. Same thing with every mitzvah. Every mitzvah is a vessel that corresponds to a will of Hashem, a certain instruction. But when it comes to the Torah, the Tikkunim says that Kudsha Brichu Ve'oraita Chadhu, the Torah and Hashem is one. So they're not like separate entities, separate instructions. It's all one. The Torah is really one with Hashem. So he says, in the same way that Ba'adam Matachton, the human being down here below, there's no comparison between the vitality in the limbs compared to the vitality of the mind, which is subdivided into Chokhmah bin Avadat. The Evarim, the limbs, are connected to the nefesh, which gives them the vitality. They're connected, but they're separate, they're apart, they're two separate things. Whereas the sechel, the mind, is completely connected and united with the neshama, as though they would be one. So in the same way he says with the light of the Or Ein Sof that is dressed up in the positive commandments, compare that to the light that is in the faculties of Chokhmah bin Avadat through the Chokhmah of Torah. Each one according to his abilities, according to how much he can learn. there's a vast difference between them. The light that permeates or that corresponds to the various organs and the limbs is of course important, but in some ways it's apart, it's separate. It's an instruction from Hashem. But here we're talking about the Torah, the actual limud of the Torah, the actual learning of the Torah, which is one parcel with the Kedusha of Hashem, the holiness of Hashem. So basically the difference is a very big difference, because one is able to accomplish a lot more with the learning of Torah than through the observance of the mitzvot, which even though they are definitely important, but they are separate. So their light is not as great as the light that affects the faculties of Chokhmah bin Abadat, the mind, which is really part of the neshama. So just for us to understand the difference between the mind and the organs in the human body, and to understand the difference between the light that the Torah produces, he gives us this example that we know how the mind is definitely a lot more important than the rest of the body.
And the soul? The mind?
No, the mind is a part with the soul. So in the same way that by us the mind is supreme, the same is true with the Torah. If we compare it or relate it to the mitzvot give vitality to the various limbs and organs. Yes, each one corresponds to a different ivar, but here we're talking about the light of the Torah, which is completely connected and united at all times with Hashem. It's like a part of Hashem. And what it affects the Chokhmah bin Avadat. It does therefore a lot more to the individual than each individual mitzvah. He goes on to say that even though our grasp of Torah is only in physical terms, when we learn Torah, we're talking about the physical world. When we learn halachot, it relates to something physical that we're doing. Nonetheless, Torah is compared to water. Just like water comes down from a high place to a low place, the Torah came down from a high place to the low physical world. That's the Ratzon of Hashem. That's His Chokhmah. That's His will. That it come down into this world and that we immerse ourselves into. Even though it relates to this physical world, and it's only physical, many times it's physical matters that we're describing, that we're talking about, still, that's the nature of the Torah, that it comes down from a high place, even to a lower place. Yes?
How about when some kids, they're born with the old soul, and they're in the young body?
Yeah, individuals have a soul that may have lived before. That's what reincarnation is all about. And sometimes that soul does belong to a very, very lofty individual. In other words, it's a lofty soul in the body of a very simple person. People do not even know the soul that they have. Sometimes it could be a lofty soul in the body of a simple individual. And it's difficult to know these things. You know, not everyone knows which neshama he has. So, in the end, what happens is that Hashem embedded in the soul I guess I don't want to call it a chip, but a sense of direction, that the soul knows exactly what it needs to do, where it needs to go, what it needs to perform in order to rectify and accomplish its mission. Otherwise, how should it know?
But
So
it's an old soul in a young body.
Yeah. So what does that have to do with it?
What is the kid supposed to do? He's like, the person can be 10 years old, but the soul is 65.
No, the soul matures together with the physical body. The soul, remember, is in a sense trapped in the body.
Right.
It's not completely able to express itself until it has matured. Whereas the nefesh habehemi, the physical spirit, is very, very active from the very beginning. It wants to eat, it wants to do things. But that spiritual soul, even though it has certain constraints or limitations in the physical body, once it learns and it matures, give it some time, it will be able to express itself. The problem is when that individual is deprived of a good, solid Jewish education. That's where the trouble begins. that the chances for it to figure things out on its own are more difficult. But sometimes Hashem awakens the soul when it's 30, 40 years old and tells it, listen, wake up, stop sleeping. Life is short and you have so much to accomplish. And Hashem has various ways of awakening people. That is what Baal Teshuvah is all about. An individual who has done Teshuvah, why is he doing Teshuvah? Something woke him up, shook him up. It could be he had a special parent or grandparent whose merit is helping their grandson to do Teshuvah. It could be that he did some very, very special deed when he was a young man that now is coming back to speak up for him. Hashem helped this guy. He doesn't know any better. Hashem wants people to succeed. So he sends us reminders. Those reminders can, by the way, sometimes come in a dream. There's all kinds of ways that people are woken up. But some decide to go back to sleep. and they lose out. But Hashem will somehow let a person know what he needs to know to rectify himself. What did we just say, how important the Torah says? Now he goes back to what he said before. Even so that the Torah does so much for the nefesh because of what it affects, the mental faculties, still, lo ha-midrash ikar ela ma'aseh. Learning is not the most important thing. All of a sudden he goes back. He says, it's ma'aseh. What really matters is deeds. Because a person might take from this, might get the impression, okay, I'm going to learn the whole day. No, Hashem says, I want you to act. Don't just learn. Learning is very, very important, but this world is about actions, about deeds. Lo ha-midrash hu ha'ikar ela ma'aseh. You can't just learn. You have to do things. As the Pasuk says, hayom la'asotam. It's only now while we're alive that we have the chance to perform. Not in the kever, not in the grave. Can't do anything anymore in the grave. So this is your chance. Learning is very important for what it does, but remember, what really counts and what really will make a difference in this world and the afterlife is the mitzvot, are the deeds. And because of that, mevatlim talmud Torah, he brings down the kiyum mitzvah. She'i efshar al yedei acherim. You actually interrupt a class of Torah, if necessary, to do a mitzvah that nobody else can take care of. This is a mitzvah that has to be done now. Nobody else can take care of that mitzvah, only you. But you're learning Torah, and you were told Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Torah is outweighs everything. True, but this is a mitzvah that cannot be done by anyone else. Then you go ahead and do it. You stop your learning momentarily, and you go and do the mitzvah if it's a mitzvah that it cannot be done by others. Why? Kizeh kol ha'adam. In the end, this is what man is all about. Tachlit briato, the ultimate purpose of his creation and his coming down into this world is to observe mitzvot, we've been saying. In order to bring down the Shekhinah, in other words, the divine presence in this world, to make this world an abode for the divine presence. So the glory of Hashem fills the entire world, the physical world, and everybody will see. In other words, how are we going to accomplish all that? If not through the observance of mitzvot, continuous observance of the commandments. But, going back to what we said before, if that mitzvah can be done by others, then we don't cancel, interrupt the shiur of Torah, the class of Torah. But wait a minute, isn't the Torah just a commentary on the mitzvot, he says? Yeah, it's a commentary of the mitzvot. It is nonetheless a aspect of the Chokhmah Binah V'Dat, of the Or Ein Sof, and therefore the learning of it, immersing oneself in it, brings about a greater light than the light that comes about through the observance of individual mitzvot that just correspond to the individual organs. So even though, yes, Torah is a commentary of the mitzvot, true, it explains it, still, because of what it represents, because of the essence of what it is, the Chokhmah Binah V'Dat, of the Or Ein Sof, what it does, therefore, is a lot more. The light that it brings upon the individual is greater than the light that's brought about through the observance of the individual mitzvot. And this is what Rav Sheshet said, Chadai nafshai Lecha karai, lecha tanai, was be happy, speaking to his nefesh, because I'm learning for you, I'm studying for you. In other words, what I am doing through the learning is ultimately for you, for the nefesh. So be happy that I'm learning. It is all for you. Towards the end, he adds one more interesting idea, that deriving this light that an individual is able to draw from the Ein Sof on his nefesh and on the nefashot of all of Israel, which is called Shekhinah or Knesset Israel, which he will eventually explain later on, which is the Mekor, which is the source of all the neshamot of the Jewish people. This comes about through the Esek HaTorah that is called Kriyah, that is called calling to Hashem. So here he says like this: the bringing of light, the drawing of light on his nefesh and on the neshafot, and on the nefashot of all the Jewish nation through the learning of Torah is called calling out to Hashem. Now, when we say a person koreh b'Torah, usually we mean that he's reading the Torah. Here, in order for us to understand this last point, he uses that term, koreh b'Torah, to mean koreh to Hashem through the Torah. Learning Torah, and through the learning Torah, we call out to Hashem. What's the significance of that? Imagine when you call a friend, and your intent is that your friend should pay attention to you, should turn to you, should come to you. So, even though, of course, that type of calling to a friend we cannot use when we call out to Hashem, it's very, very different, completely different. But in a similar vein, that is what we do when we learn Torah. He says, when we learn Torah, we call out to Hashem and ask of Him to be with us. Like a child asks his father, don't leave me alone, be with me at all times. And that is the meaning of the pasuk. Karov Hashem lechol korav lechol hashikru ve'emet. Hashem is close to all those who call on Him. Lechol hashikru ve'emet, to all those that call Him in earnest, sincerely. And here, the word emet is representative of the Torah. So Hashem is close to all those who call upon Him, and that could be through prayer, but especially so those who call upon Him through the Torah, through the learning of Torah. So here, we're talking about calling Hashem through the Torah, as opposed to calling Hashem just like a child cries out to his father. It makes a big difference. And this is what the prophet complained about. En koreh b'shimcha. He could have said some other word. Nobody's calling to you. No, nobody's calling in your name. As the commentaries explain, that references the Torah. Nobody's calling out to you. Nobody's relating to you through the Torah. So this was a big complaint of the Navi. And as we've explained before, Hashem says, I would forgive them and overlook other sins, but not the Torah. If they leave the Torah, they've left everything. If they would do other things that are not right, but continue to learn Torah, the light of the Torah would draw them back to me. If a Jew is weak in some area, but he continues to learn Torah, B'ezrat Hashem, God willing, that light of the Torah will bring him back. So you cannot afford to not learn Torah. So that is why he's saying that the prophet was complaining about this, because this is lacking. Calling out to Hashem through the Torah. People may pray, people may cry. No. Let's see you in action with Torah. And he finishes the chapter by reminding the maskil, those who pay attention, those who use their head, those that take a moment to think about what they're doing, that they should pay attention to the time that they're learning Torah. That ultimately the goal of this learning Torah should be to instill in us the fear and the love for Hashem. While we are learning the Torah, we should think about that, because to learn the Torah just for the sake of learning and knowing is okay as a start, but that's not the ultimate goal of the learning Torah. It's to draw into us that light of Hashem. And the Torah that is done in such a way that is for the sake of heaven, L'Shem Shamayim, has a tremendous advantage over the learning of the Torah that is not done L'Shem Shamayim. It brings about a lot of more positive effects on the individual than if you would just learn it plainly without any intent of doing it L'Shem Shamayim. Nonetheless, the rabbis tell us, start off doing it even Shelo L'Shem Shamayim, even though all you want to do is learn it because you're curious. Still, that is a place to start. But in the end, he's telling us, Itbonen HaMaskil, one who has a head over his shoulder, one who's really thinking about what he's doing, he should really pay attention to make sure that if he's already learning, might as well maximize it to its fullest. Learn it properly. Learn it L'Shem Shamayim. Be kovei itim laTorah. Set aside time for Torah. Show that it's important to you. Not just once a week, whenever you feel like it. If you missed that half an hour because you have to go to a wedding, make it up somehow. And if you can't make up half an hour, make up 15 minutes. People don't realize that without the Torah, they lose out a lot. Learning the Torah on a regular basis will do a lot of good for him. It will control his evil inclination. It will remind him of his mission. It will calm him down perhaps. It will gladden his heart. Right? There's a lot of Pesukim, a lot of verses that remind us the benefits of learning Torah. But here his main point is, just make sure that you use the learning Torah as a gateway, as a stepping stone, to B'ezrat Hashem bring upon you the fear of heaven.